ways. And I'm going to do this in a more intuitive way. I've done many presentations, and presentations dovetail into each other. They're similar themes. And the themes that are similar always lend themselves to this, holism. Holism is a beautiful word that is linked to the word holistic and holy. It's interesting that your name, Holly, is woven into that truly. It's interesting that it's true, right? There you are. But it's H-O-L-L, right? Double L. Generally H-O-L-L. Yeah, but holy is, in its deeper reaches, the religious, emotional perspective around holistic. In true religious science. So you see, spiritual science is not strictly religious. Religion is a different creature. Religion is where there's a priestcraft, where there's at best a series of rituals and practices designed to help you to enter into communion with yourself, with existence, with others. But at worst, religion creates a separation between you and existence and sets up a series of relatively artificial rituals which then lose their spirit. So it's an interesting story there. There's lots of ways of describing it. This presentation is called Astrology and the Intelligent Design of Nature. And what I'm going to show you first will be a type of prelude, type of another feature which can be dovetailed into it, but which I'm deciding to add just to bring extra emphasis to some beautiful themes that will be elaborated in the next part. Okay? So what I've noticed over the years of doing these presentations is people get a little bit overwhelmed. They're a bit blown away, a bit over their head at worst. The spiritual science that metaphysics is rather sophisticated, and the mainstream culture of our modern day world has moved away from it into what would be basically called a materialistic focus. I'm not specifically judging that. I'm not. It has its time, it has its place. It will, as the laws of entropy go, it will live itself out and then die like a fireworks. Everything does. Except deeper truth. Deeper truth has a way of staying there like the tides of the ocean, like the moon waxing and waning. And even beyond that, just deeper realities of life have a way of staying, even though trends and cycles occur. So even this current materialistic trend that we're in is already date stamped. It can't last because it isn't true. So we live in a physical body. That's good. We live in a physical dimension. That's good. And by the way, good is another way of saying God. I'm not talking about Judeo-Christian man God in the sky, Zeus in another form with some thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening. I'm talking about an intelligence in nature, an intrinsic intention for there to be life. There's a saying, this is something very fundamental to the spiritual science. It goes like this: life comes from life. Quite obvious, quite simple. Just as you and I come from mother, life comes from life. But in the materialistic model, life comes from nothing. It's kind of like a big sail. And some of its tentacles on this creature are pharmaceutical. It's very big business. It's what they call Dark Force. In Star Wars, it was the Empire and the rebels, so to speak. The Force consciousness recognize, oh, there's something else. We need to be sure of that. And it works with nature in all these wonderful ways. So there's many ways of looking at this. So this little prelude to the actual story I'll tell you in a few minutes, it tells of the intelligent design of nature, looks at where humanity is at right now, what would be called the human condition. The human condition is a way of describing, in a wide-angled sense, what's really going on right now. And it's a very Buddhist statement, an endeavor to look at reality and say, oh, we're at this place and time, these things are occurring. So, holism tells a story, and it begins like this. From the dimensionless void, what is sometimes called the nadi, there emerged the primordial Om, the logos. This is the idea. The idea is similar to the plan. It's as though existence, God, whatever you want to call it, some source of intelligence and love and purpose and intention and creativity, however you want to define it, omnipotent, omnipresent, all these ways, we can say had this intention. It's sometimes called the logos. The logos basically is another way of saying the universe is conscious and intelligent. And it, in its plan, gave rise from the singularity. This is what in physics is called the singularity, the essential oneness and unity of all things, gives rise to, from the singularity comes the oneness, or a state of unity, where the point in the center can be described as like a pebble dropped in water, and it creates a ripple. See that? Where the point in the center is surrounded by a circle. The point in the center represents the eternal now, and the point of consciousness. The point of consciousness. It's very important to understand that principle. In its expanded expression, like a pebble dropped into water, we see this circle around it, which is symbolic of a cycle and of a sphere, and it also represents without beginning or end. That's how beautiful a circle is. If you were to say, okay, everybody, what shape is God? And the answer often is it's a circle. Why? Because it's without beginning or end. I'm not talking about a man. We're talking about another thing. Okay. So, we get into this pure state of unity. Now, just one last thing before we leave this side of this point in the center, which is surrounded by a circle. It's also the symbol of the sun. It's known in astrology, if you look at the sun in your chart, it's this symbol. It's also known as the monad, which is the oneness. But here's one final interesting play of your mind. Imagine you're looking down a tunnel and you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Can you see that? The light is the other side. Like when you die, you go down the tunnel. You go to the other side. The other side, in a way, represents and symbolizes source. So what that means is where the material model suggests that life began out there, the metaphysical model says, no, life began in there. And it becomes this wonderful mystery, what's within. The interdimensional planes aren't just, when we think of heaven as up there, it's a way of describing something. But actually, the irony The paradox is that it's in there. So what comes out of this essential unity is this notion of duality. Duality is now that there's an essential separation. The primordial Om creates a sound. And the sound, if you say you take your hand in front of you just like this, right? And you imagine that the sound creates a vibration like this. Just do that for a second. It's a wonderful little exercise. Do you notice that it looks like many? Do you notice? Like the one becomes like this little, oh, it looks like two, at least, and more, but two, right? It's a riddle. So that's where they say perception is woven into the riddle of reality, which appears as a duality, but it's actually a singularity. This kind of stuff can make you crazy, but it's as simple as this. Ultimately, all things are one thing, and the one thing shares a common source, but the appearance of existence is subject to duality, and duality can be described as where the two ends, the pole or the vibration of the primordial Om. See, when you go Om, and it goes Om, like you pluck the string on a guitar, suddenly it looks like, and that riddle, make no mistake, that is what existence is. In its beautiful, fundamental source, it's one thing, but it's set into motion. And above and beyond creating the dualistic image like this is very static, but it's actually more of motion. And the motion where the two are separated, they naturally want to come back together. It's just like disturbing the water. The water wants to come back together and be flat again. Right? You can there's flat water, you throw a big stone in it, big splash, big waves, big ripples, and all of a sudden it comes back down. So what this is symbolized is as this. When you see the symbol of the Tao, the yin-yang, the female-male, and where astrology steps in, for example, but not just astrology, other disciplines too, what's called karma dharma. Karma means you have a past that causes and effects into motion, and then they're going to have cause creates effect. And the dharma of your life is the emphasis of how you're meant to be to fulfill a certain plan, certain mandate, certain contract, which is linked to balancing old karma. And karma can be good, by the way. It's not just all bad, by no means. But there can be negative or difficult karma, which means actions from the past which are divisive, separative, selfish, versus unitive. So if you want to have good karma, your actions are unitive. If you want to produce negative karma, they're divisive. And it's almost inevitable in duality that we produce some amount of negative karma. It's not that bad, but it's like a balance of scales. Did you create more than negative, or more positive, or a balance? Balance is good. So, it allows you to live in the world. Now, what this Tao symbol, what's also known as the Tai Chi, shows is that always within the yin is the yang, within the yang is the yin. That means that the notion of yin and yang as male and female as separate is ultimately an illusion, because the male and female is simply the illusion of separation of source. Ultimately, the source has no gender. But when it goes into separation, it presents as male-female. And what do the male and female want to do? They want to unite. They want to merge. But what happens in the flow of existence? That's exactly that urge to bond, to unite, to procreate, produces more life. It has a funny riddle to it. Oh, by the way, when you do that, because the reason is because we're it experiencing itself. What is it? Divine divinity. Divinity is life, and life begets life. From life comes life. So it's a funny and interesting thing. So when I say we're it experiencing itself, we're God experiencing itself, we can't help but in our desire to merge with another man and woman, basically, is that we're going to enter into some measure of procreation. It's rather simple and beautiful. And so the Chinese have a saying, from the one, what is otherwise in physics called the singularity, the principle of unity, emerge the two, which represents duality, polarity. And from the two, the Chinese say, emerge the 10,000 things. Say, once you have duality, oh my God, procreation goes crazy and starts to procreate in every single level, in every single way. Now, in a most fundamental sense, it creates the two, creates the four. You see, now, the reason the two create the four, it's a very beautiful consideration that when you take, let me show you, I'll illustrate this very briefly. It's very simple, and there's a lot of little wonderful riddles in metaphysics that are very simple. It goes like this. This unity principle, which is with a pointed center, and this is the singularity, simply takes one line and then another line and creates four. Isn't that wonderful? It's very simple. You think, oh yeah, duh, that's obvious, but remember, this is the principle of being without beginning or end. This is the eternal now. We just create one line this way, and one line that way, male, female, if you like, or the opposite. However you wish to define it. That created four, not three. Interesting. Why? North, south, east, west, earth, air, fire, water. Just like that. When you have four, oh my God, the first of the 10,000 things after the essential duality is wholeness, holism, holiness is woven into that symbol right there. And by the way, in symbolism, the circle is the circle of spirit encased in it is the cross of matter. The cross is known as the cross of materiality of matter. And the cross of matter, this would be called the line of consciousness and the line of power, which I'll explain to you in a few minutes. So, and out of the two come the four. So it's another way of looking at the yin-yang. And it goes from the two into four. And earth, air, fire, and water means solid, gas, liquid, and friction. That's the laws of physics in a nutshell. It's very simple, very erudite. So all of our academics is rather valid enough, but at worst complicates simplicity. And genius simplifies it. And it's very much woven into a model like that. So we have this holistic model where the physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, let's say, manifests, whichever way you like to say it, as you, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. That represents you. Spiritual would be, on one hand, the spark. And what we saw at the beginning, by the way, the point in the center, the circle around, that's the spark. But the circle is your aura, because around you is an energetic field. So this, in a way, represents us. Here we are. We're standing up. There's the cross. We come to this principle. So we have an aura around us. And that would be the spiritual, the spark, but also the aura. And then the mental body and the emotional body are layers of that aura. So when we think of our physical body, we think, oh, it is very layered. It's a little hard to see here. But you have a very good skeletal, you have nervous system, you have what's called the circulatory system, excuse me. Then you have the lungs, and you have the intestinal whole system, the liver. And then you have the muscular system. You have layers. The key point is layers. Even the mind, this would be the mental. So what I want to do is illustrate that the mind is not just the brain. Your mind is not just in your brain. Just like, you know how the computers work with a cloud? And this computer is like a brain, but in the modern day now, you can have all your information in the cloud. So you can throw this computer on the ground, it can smash, but everything in the cloud exists. Right? So how nice is that? You get another computer, you go into the cloud. That means all your pictures, all your everything that you have called files is in the cloud. What does that mean? That means your mind did not die, even though your brain did. It's a very important understanding that's happening in our society. Oh, we're not seeing that in the mainstream mindset. We're just, but if you think about it, oh yes. This is where we can't help in all of our technology, all of our science. It's very beautiful that we are simply replicating nature. Nature already did it, but it's nothing wrong with doing that. It's wonderful. We like it, but it's nothing more than a version of the story that's always existed. So that's good to know. So now in our emotional body, we get into the notion of our heart, what we desire, what we value, and we get into that heart chakra principle. And this would be the fire, the principle of you as, okay, this doesn't show very well. What this shows us is there's a spark in the center, then there's an auric field, the spiritual. And then this goes into the another version. This expands upon it. This is showing you your auric field now. And now what's important to understand is the sun itself. We live in a solar system. And the sun itself is like a being in a cosmic sense. It's called a cosmic being. And it too has the same sheaths around it as we do. The sun has an auric field. It has a physical body, a mental body, an emotional body, and an etheric body. This is the ancient understanding of the metaphysicians, of the seers, the mystics. And so too, though, does the planet Earth. The planet Earth, otherwise sometimes referred to as Gaia, a being, her, not a thing, but it's called a planetary lord, where this is called a solar lord. This is a planetary lord, okay, within the grand cosmic scheme. And then we get us as, this is where sometimes individuals are called lords. But on a spiritual level, we're all lords. We all carry this divine spark, and we have this auric field. But in the politics of life, we get into, various ways of putting ourselves in higher or lower positions. And I'm not judging that. I'm not saying that's wrong. But if we were awake to our spiritual state, we will remember that even though we might hold high status on the planet, we're still all souls. And a very conscious leader would know that, and then they would conduct the politics accordingly. That's unfortunately not always the case, and that's called corruption. So that's a basic indication of our holiness, is that we're spiritual beings having human experiences, and as spiritual beings, we are multidimensional. We have a mental, we have a physical, etheric, mental, the order is physical, etheric, emotional, mental body. And the etheric, emotional, and mental body are the sheaths, the layers of our aura. And each one has different layers to it, so it's rather interesting. So we get into our multidimensionality. And we come back to what's this logos, this sounding light principle. The logos is an intelligence, an intention, a plan. And it has, the way it works through nature is through sound and light, like thunder and lightning. Thunder and lightning is a way of defining sounding light. The sounding light is more eloquently described as the primordial Om. A sound in creation creates a vibration. And it's working on many levels, though. It's not as simplistic as it may seem. In other words, if we were to hear the primordial sound, we would probably hear what would be something to be akin of a symphony of angels. We would hear a grand, great, wondrous, beyond imagination, blissful sound, which would be very intricate, very wonderful. Now, when musicians create sound, it's beautiful. especially when it's beautiful sound. So there's a lot to be said about that. But if we were to hear the primordial sound, well, it would be a whole different trip. It would be something not only that we hear with our ears, it would not only be something we sense with every fiber of our being, but it would go beyond that. It would go beyond. So it would be something of a mystical enlightenment experience. So the logos, or the sounding light, manifests in this another version of the story I just told you. This is grand state of unity, this oneness, but each and every one of us have a spark. We're a spark of the divine, and the spark of the divine manifests as, for example, in this image, like a candle. We each have that spark of divinity, which again is a small version of that big version there. And then we come into this image, that underwater image represents our emotional body. And this would be a pure emotion, as though we're in a realm of pure, an ocean of emotion. This would be called the Buddhic realm, or this is actually called the monadic. This is the nirvanic, this is the monadic, this is the Buddhic. This is how it's described in translation. And the Buddhic realm is the ocean of emotion. But then we come to what's called the causal realm. The causal realm is the soul's abode. It's a non-dualistic realm. The soul kind of exists in here, but at the ground floor of this water, right there, beneath it, right beneath that ground, is a realm of geometries. So we get back to the yin and the yang there. So we get into this realm of what's the flower of life, the sacred geometry, and the Fibonacci. And we get into, this is another version of a mandala. We get into every kind of shape. We as human beings are much more complicated in an esoteric sense than it seems. And then we have all these various forms of Fibonacci in nature. This is multiple spirals within spirals. If you go in, you'll see those spirals within spirals, just like this. But there's different ways of exhibiting it. And this is what back here, this image in the background, is called a Shri Yantra. It's a form of mantra which is meant to represent a sacred sound all on its own. So there's all these ways, but woven within is the yin and yang. So we call it the causal realm is the mind of God, where all the design of nature, there's a blueprint in nature. But also where our karmic records are stored, and the soul, our soul, exists at this dimensional level. So it's a very paradoxical thing that we're here, we're a soul incarnate, but on a conscious level we're a personality, but we actually are a soul incarnate. And on a soul level, we exist in a non-dualistic realm. Very complicated to understand, but I'm going to trust you're going to work with that a little bit. It's a little bit complicated. But in this realm where this is the building block of creation, which will manifest as archetypes. Archetypes can be seen, these here, the primordial archetypes are shapes. And they manifest as sacred geometrical and very sacred mathematical principles and so forth, as we get the notion of the flower of life and the Fibonacci, what's called sacred geometry and so forth. Even the yin and yang, the checkerboards, very funny primary squares and triangles and circles, and goes on and on. As a matter of fact, all angular shapes like triangles, squares, hexagons, octagons, whatever shape you want, all ultimately emerge from a circle. That's called the flower of life, which we'll leave alone for now because it's so in discussion. But this is, there's in our archetypal nature, we can talk about there's 4 basic groups, and within each group there's 3. That's how astrology works, 4 times 3. So some people in their core nature are caregivers, some are creator types, some are ruler types. Then we get the member, belonging to, the lover, experiencing bliss, the jester, joking and fooling around. Then there's the warrior, the outlaw, the magician, the sage, the explorer, the innocent. So now don't underestimate that you will be one primarily, but you'll have two or three also particularly strong. But all of us are all of these at any given lifetime. But if you start to look at the emphasis of where we are, you'll notice, oh my God, yes, I'm one of those. For example, I'm quite this one. See that? Just there you go. That makes sense. Now I'm not doing magical tricks, but I am interested in deep magic in terms of the metaphysical. So the using knowledge of how the world works to transform others' visions is a way of describing it. I also might have aspects of the explorer. You have to start to go into, you almost put them in an order. That out of the 12, you go, this one's on the top, this is second, third, fourth. And so while they're all there, there's certain ones that have greater emphasis, but you can tap into all of them at any point, isn't that right? So you can see how different people are like that. They're, oh, that person's an outlaw kind of thing. Now, but to destroy what is not working doesn't mean they're a bad person. But are they a rebel in a good way or not? Or a warrior, proving one's worth through courage. So you may discover who you are on that, and it might take you a while to decipher it. But, it can, this one here does come to mind, but then you might have a couple of the others, two or three, that come up first, right? So I'll leave you to decide what you are. If you want one of those, I can send you. But if you go online and just look up archetypes, you'll see this. Now this is where it gets to another level of, when you get into the realm of archetypes, there's different models, different ways of defining it. So we won't spend too much time here. There's lots to be said about these. It's very fun, but we won't spend time. Let's just go back to it. Remember I said the mental, we have that's the causal dimension, archetypal. Then we get into the mental plane, which is like the heaven worlds. When we die, we don't all go to the same place. But we all have gone to all places, but each life might determine when we die, we sort of are vibrating in a certain way and go to a certain place. It's hard to understand, but there's many lifetimes, many incarnations. It's sort of given that each life you go to heaven. Sometimes you might go to heaven, other times you might end up here. They say most people go to the astral plane. Now you say, oh, heaven's wonderful, but that doesn't look so bad, does it? You get to go to the astral plane, or you might end up in, now there's mostly these two planes, but each of these two planes have different levels. And if you go higher, if you're more spiritually advanced, you go into the causal realm, right? But if you're really advanced, you go to this realm. But if you're super in touch with your, what they call your Atman, your soul, you're in touch with this. Then if you're in nirvana, if you're really enlightened, you're there. See how that works? It's kind of interesting, where this is what spiritual science suggests. And we get in touch with parts of ourselves at different levels. And so where you get this Christian notion that, oh, you want to die and go to heaven, it's a little bit flat, a little bit square. It's valid enough to say that, but it's like, oh, you just think that's the end. You miss me. That is not even, there's much more than that. That's the idea. So you get to this mental plane, and then the astral plane, this is more intellectual, more mind stuff, linear somehow. Beautiful, but the astral plane is more emotional, very groovy, very psychedelic, and most of us in our emotional bodies end up here. Now the etheric body is more what's called a transceiver. It means it transmits and it receives simultaneously. Just like our phone is like a transceiver. It transmits and receives simultaneously. So that's exciting. And the etheric body is very much what keeps the so-called etheric web. There's other ways of defining it. So we on the planet are a weave of the earth, air, fire, and water. We have an animal body, but we're divine. Isn't that great? And you see, one of the things that's happening in this day and age is, if you go on the internet and you're looking in a certain kind of way, you realize, oh my God, the awakening is happening. A lot of people are putting out, artists are doing really good work of helping contribute to the awakening. So in our etheric body, this is one particular fellow who's very much in the revolution of trying to awaken people to a spiritual reality. So we're not limited material beings, which is what Dark Force wants you to believe, and therefore just buy our medicine. It's all about that. We like to make you sick, so you buy our medicine, and it perpetuates a little status quo. That's what's going on. And we're in a revolution right now, and we're trying to break through that kind of setup that has been established in the world that wants to convince us of our material existence, and therefore, you're dust when you die, so you want to live a certain way, and ultimately, the big sale ultimately is pharmaceuticals, the multi-trillion-dollar industry. So we're really in a funny time right now. So we get back to the etheric body, and there's all these levels of our being, and these are just versions of how to depict it. But we have what's called, this is actually called the Taurus tube, but it's T-O-R-U-S, as opposed to like the astrology sign of T-A-U. And there's just this kind of, it sort of feeds into a loop, a self-perpetuating loop. But there's different ways of defining the etheric body. It's what exists really close to us. When we die and the mental, emotional, and etheric body leave the physical, it disintegrates. Especially the etheric, there's nothing to hold it together. It's a electrochemical, it's like it's been unplugged. So it's rather interesting how that works, the etheric. Now, this is just a way of defining things you can do to build your etheric body. Basically, nature, being in nature, sunshine. You can balance your chakras. This is meditating in nature. And then there's also focus. Yoga can contribute to the focus principle. Those all build your etheric body. Oops. And so now we are, as beings, we're plugged into creation. We have chakras, 7 chakras, what I call the 7-pronged plug into the etheric dimension of existence, which is, again, like a transceiver. It receives from us, but it also receives from the causal plane, sort of an archetypal code. So we have free will, and we influence our etheric body by our choices and actions. We're producing a healthy state where all our etheric body is healthy and our chakras are healthy. But the drama of life makes it so that, we're like this. It's not always that static. And, we can, by our choices and actions, various karmas, be in very active dynamic chakra, or we can be not as strong and so forth. So it's very not about who's better or worse, but ideally they'd all be very active. We'd be very, very healthy and dynamic and energetic and so forth, but it's just not that simple because of karma and dharma. So it gets into this whole story. So in this holism is embedded in 7 dimensions, rays, or chakras. This is what's called the caduceus. This is called the male and the female that goes up the spine, so we can move like the kundalini. And they're known as Ida and Pingala, the male and the female. And it's woven within the very symbol of health within the entire establishment. But the entire establishment has blinded itself and humanity from that fundamental principle, and it markets a synthetic, false, you understand, and it's getting us sick. That's what we see in the world right now. So the 7 chakras are woven within the universe. It's as though the universe itself has chakras. This would be a galaxy in the background, and it's just meant to illustrate, the entire galaxy has chakras, and the planet itself has chakras. And this is called the principle of as above, so below. And this is just an example. If we balance our chakras, this is an example of if our 6 chakras out of balance, we can lack energy, we can get sexual dysfunction, reproductive organ disorders, lower back issues, kidney, spleen, or pancreas issues. You see where we can just balance the chakra with no drugs required necessarily. So then this is another way of looking at chakras. And so we get into this principle of astrology where there's this as above, so below, as within, so without. These are old statements, very ancient. We recognize there's a mirror reflection between what's going on in the planets, and there's this core theme of where the solar system itself as a whole is like a cosmic seed, and it parallels the principle of a cell. It's a cosmic cell, the entire solar system. Within the galaxy, the solar system is the size of a cell. That's what relativity is. That's what Einstein was trying to say. So we get into that, and then we get into, beyond even the cell, we get into what's called the atomic. And just as the atomic shows a nucleus with all these electrons and protons going around it, that's exactly how the solar system works. The sun is like the nucleus of the cell called the solar system. The planets go around it in a similar fashion. And then we have layers of creation in the atmosphere, as we have layers in the earth itself, and as we have layers in the skin, and as we have layers, the planet itself is layered. Then the human body has layers: skeletal, musculatory, circulatory, and so forth. And so then we get into the planets, and this gets into how the planets are connected to our human body in such a way. So what I'm going to do here is take a point of departure. That's where astrology steps into the picture. And I'm going to show you another. This is like a type of prelude. I know there's a lot in that, and that could be enough. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I just wanted to give you a bit of a metaphysical background to how there's sort of scientific principles. It's called the metaphysical principles that very almost evidently exist to illustrate how life works. There's a logic, there's a plan. This is where we get into this intelligent design. Now, in our society, in the world right now, what we're dealing with is a world that is in conflict between what's called the intelligent design of nature and what's called the material Big Bang model. Big Bang model, at worst, represents this arbitrary random. In other words, it happened, there was chance, our existence is an accident, it's random, arbitrary, and that's what's called dark force. That dark force wants to convince us that this is all just for nothing. We exist, there's no real rhyme or reason, life sucks, it hurts when you come in, there's a lot of pain along the way, then you die, so what that produces is a lot of neurosis, and a lot of competition, and a lot of anger, and fear, and war, and then people fight, and the dark force preys on it. That's exactly what's happening. It's an old story. You can see that, right? It's parasitic. It wants to produce fear and reaction and strife, and it preys on it, and the way it preys on it, it's interesting to say that word, is it capitalizes on the problem. So it produces the problem, and it capitalizes on the problem. Isn't that sad? But that's the way it works. And that's where we have to be aware. So now, in astrology, we have a relationship between the sun, moon, and earth, fundamentally. And we, in our life is all about relationships. Relationship is everything. But the primary relationship is always with you, your own body, mind, heart, and soul. Now, the sun in that, when we say soul, in the body, mind, heart, soul principle, the earth would be the body, the mind would be the sun. And remember, the mind is not dying, and the soul would be in that model, the moon, which is represented. So it's not a perfect translation, but it works. Now, the sun in astrology is very, very important because in Western astrology, where it's based on the sun's light. It's not the constellations, Western astrology. It's the sun's light. And all over the world, there's these wonderful monuments like Stonehenge, and there's all these places where solstices and equinoxes built thousands of years ago, on the very day of solstice and equinox, the sun will shine in those chambers, and it will illuminate the chamber, meaning the sameness of that principle remains the same. Now, also, we on the planet have a moon. Moon's very, very important. Without the moon, there'd be no life. It produces tides, and there's a whole story about how the moon produces that. And we have phases of the moon. So when the moon is in conjunction with the sun, it's new. Then it starts to move away from the sun, and it produces phases. So in as much as the moon is significant to life on the planet, without a moon there'd be no life. That means any sentient beings in any part of the galaxy or universe has a moon that waxes and wanes. What that means, by the way, is that they invariably have a system of astrology. I like to say that because this, astrology begins with the measurement of the waxing and waning of the moon and the changing of the seasons, and also day turning to night, meaning the planet invariably has, for itself to be healthy, it has to turn on its axis. So it could be quicker. Day and night could be every 10 hours for all we know. But it's going to go day, night, day, night, day, night, as long as that Earth is turning. All right, so that's interesting. So we on the planet Earth are experiencing life here, and around us we see planets. So that's where astrology begins. It shows all these planets around us. And remember the cell principle of the solar system that works as a unit. And it has been described as like a clock, a watch, the gears of a watch. Beyond, let's put aside the quartz principle. There's all these gears that each one can be seen as the cycle of a planet. And that's how they were designed. There's this intelligence in it. And we, within our existence, exist within a realm of where there's clocks and calendars. Clocks and calendars are the measurement of the motion of the Earth on its axis turning. The moon, the Earth turning on its axis is a day. Night goes light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, like yin-yang every day, just like now. Or yin, whereas the day is yang, as the story goes. But also every month, which is the moon going around the Earth creates a month. And the Earth going around the sun creates a year. Now in the world we have various religions, all kinds of different Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, Judaism, and Hinduism, and all kinds of others, right? So these are religion equals faith, where science came in and said, well, we want proof. And it wanted proof, but it wants proof from an empirical, five-sensory place. So where religion, in the religious movement, they really believe that God, and usually they depict God as a man, is behind creation. Religion and creationism is big out there, so that's called creationists. They believe God created the world in 7 days, and in Christianity they're very literal, very literal. Now science came in and says, no, we're the revolutionary movement of science produced a notion and theory. Oh no, there's evolution, and this crisis, creationism in schools isn't science. So their dogma is that we should teach science in schools. The only problem is science is materialistic. So you go, we have either the blind faith of creationism, that there's this man we have to obey and pray to, and if you piss him off, you're in trouble. Religion, and science goes to the opposite extreme, goes into materialism. So this is where the God says, you better listen up, or I'm going to be mad. And then in what's called modern science, you have the hadron colliders. They're trying to smash particles together to prove that creation, or to discover how creation was in the first earliest days. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but they're giving that where in classical religion, God's this big force, but anthropomorphized, meaning rather than see it as a force or a source of intelligence, make it into a person. That's a problem. But in the Higgs boson, we're looking at what's called the God particle, the source of creation. So what we get is, what we're dealing with in the human condition is that there's a tug of war between two sides, the religious and the scientific. As far as I'm concerned, science is a religion because it's filled with dogma, and it's become where science was founded upon the principle of doubt, don't believe anything, and then test, prove it empirically, because they didn't want to believe in a passively in a blind faith way. They didn't want to believe in God, so they developed this scientific method, which was very valid, nothing wrong with that, but it's produced its own set of dogmas, its own set of methods, which then said the only way is the scientific method. That's dogma. Well, why is that the only way? Well, maybe there's other ways to discover truth. So the science, well, this is the only way because it's empirical, it's measurable, it's demonstrable, it's repeatable. Whereas the Christian or the religious model says, well, you can't understand it, but God created it. So I'm sorry. So they don't have a lot of facts. They just have like the proofs in the pudding. Look around you. The science says, no, we don't buy that. And so it's this tug of war. And so there is a reconciliation, a middle ground between these polarized positions. And that's where we get back to what I showed you a few minutes ago. In the beginning was the word, or the primordial sound. It creates ripples in undisturbed etheric waters, which parallels manifesting in all dimensions. In other words, it creates this, in a very simplistic way of defining it. I realize there's more to be said about this, but when you understand that principle of the one comes to two, comes to four, and creation, this is a different metaphysical model. Now it's interesting that when sound is emitted into vacuum chambers, guess what? It creates shapes like that. That's very interesting. One of the reasons why that's interesting is that it's like a mandala. You get the 12 signs of the zodiac, for example. A mandala is a simple image, but then it has intricate divisions of the in itself is there, but it has a division principle, and the sound produces that due to vibration. So there's this one link, this one life eternal, which unites all things in the universe, animate and inanimate, one wave of life flowing through everything. That's the notion of the deeper spiritual. And we enter into this as above, so below, and we are made of the stuff of stars. That means there's this sympathy. We have this intrinsic relationship with existence. And it's been said we're made in God's image. We're intelligent, creative, intentional, purposeful, and loving. So for us to be in a divine state, there's no believing, there's no rituals, there's no have-tos, there's no prostrating, there's nothing you have to do but this. Be in your intelligence, your creativity, your intention, your purpose, and your loving heart. And that's in a way saying, okay, you're there. You're functioning as a healthy human being. Now, through this manifesting in that sounding light, manifesting through dimension, comes the shape, the form, the constitution of creation. And we see it everywhere. Everywhere, this fundamental notion of the point in the center of the ripples, where we get the spiral galaxies, which is shown in the very planets. And then look at snowflakes. How did snowflake even exist if there wasn't an intention? And leaves with their design, flowers, the food we eat. It's in our own body, in our eyes. It's in the atomic structure. It's in everything. It's very evident. We share a common source, and each shares of the same essence, originating from the one, the whole, the holy, the holistic, the unity. Now, what happens is that the one manifests through sound vibrational frequency, appears through two, which can be depicted by yin and yang, but also by what's called the Vesica Pisces. This is where the one gives life to itself. Otherwise, in biology, this is known as, what's that phrase? Cell mitosis. Cell mitosis is where the one cell divides into two, and and then the two begin to procreate. How do you like that? That's happening on a cellular level. So that's very interesting. So, and this in time, remember I mentioned that from the circular, the seed principle, manifests this, what's called the seed of life, which becomes the flower of life. And woven within the flower of life are what's called angular geometries. These are known as platonic solids. Without getting too carried away, like what you can see in here is there's a triangle, there's a square, there's a rectangle, there's an octagon, there's a hectagon. Many, many shapes are woven within this. And you can read, some of them are very intricate. That's what sacred geometry is. But remember, look, they're connecting the dots within the circles. The circle represents the principle without beginning or end. So you see what it's like, very evident that it's there as far as I'm concerned. This one principle starts to give life and all, but it seems as though the science and the mainstream don't want this simple answer for what, and there may be a purpose in that. I'm not saying there isn't, but it does so at the expense of accepting that there's a very obvious indication of something happening here. And so it enters into this belligerent, dogmatic place where it can't embrace that there's some other model that, and woven within that is this sort of, I'm in this world, I have to live, I have to survive, I can't afford to believe anything. I have to enter into, a type of, the game is this, play along. And, some people like myself say, I'm not that interested in games because some people are born to keep the lamp lit. It's not like anybody's better than anybody else, quite frankly. Nobody is. But some people have certain roles and missions, and you yourself, each of you, have your own special mission. And every mission is equally valuable in its intrinsic value, by the way. So we get back to this notion of this motion, this movement, which creates cycles and spirals. And as modern physics illustrates, what's called special characteristics, the sort of the torus tube or the etheric body is illustrating. Like it looks like that. It's like what you see there, if you look closely, is it moves, the energy waves move into the center and out to the circumference and back into the center, and it's a repeating eternal cycle of renewal. That's what the torus tube represents. But from a different angle, it's seen in a slightly different image of it as an etheric web. So this abounds in nature. It's everywhere. And it occurs at a galactic level. It occurs at a quantum level. It works. We think of universal. And what you're seeing here is every little point on there, every little point is a galaxy. And then in the very brain, in our mind, in our brain, exists synapses, what's called electrochemical brain synapses, which parallels the way that the universe is designed. So then we can think of the solar system, which is otherwise called our local cosmic environment. We live in the solar system. But we also see it in the molecular structure. These are the water molecules that illustrate design. And it's just this beautiful, clearly designed. If it was random and arbitrary, why is it so designed? That's the question. And everybody kind of knows it, but what's happening, many, many people know it, but the pressure of the politics and the dark force and certain status quo and big power, it's kind of bullying you to go, you know it, but you're not going to say it, right? It's almost like that. Because you're going to play along, because we're the mafia, we're in control of the market, we want it to be like this. We like our, quite frankly, to get into the deeper reaches of power, it's really ugly. You get into drugs, addiction, prostitution, everything dark is just because it's like feeding on itself. It sounds ugly, but it's true. That if you get deep into the high levels of power, where it's attached and addicted to power, it gets very ugly. And full of addiction, full of just low vibration, like feeding on itself. Some of it cancer. Some people just find it that way. So you get to this molecular structure, but we also see it at the planetary level. And then we see it at the celestial. This would be a solar eclipse, which looks like This is almost looks like an eye, if you think about it. And then we get, within nature, we get this principle of this eye, and tornadoes show the same sort of spiraling, cyclical principle. Then we see it in the crop circles are illustrating these principles of nature, and we see it. The crop circles are really wonderful, and they're massive. You and I would be this big. Make no mistake, this is big. You'd be very small. A tractor would look like this little thing right here. You'd be right on it, right there, driving the tractor. How big these things are. And by the way, crop circles are made in 12 seconds. It seems, it's like, some people have said, they're looking at the field, they look away, and there it is. My brain. It's not being created by people. So there's what's called interdimensionals. They're trying to wake us up, by the way, right now. This is where it gets very interesting. And so we see the Fibonacci, the spiral in creation, and this intelligence reveals itself in beauty and form. And we see poetry and motion through just the natural forces of nature, the birds, the rainbows, the seasons. But we also see it in the food we eat, the spirals. We can see mandalas in our food. So, it can make eating a whole new experience. And we see it in the stars, in the celestial field, but we also see the stars, again, in our food. And in the flowers, see the star? What you can't really see here, but you have this. Get this symbol of Venus over in its cycle, it produces an image from the Earth. This is the Earth, this model. And Venus, when it goes around us, the planet of desire and love, produces this, and over 8 years produces this. See the flower? So the planet's movement from the Earth's perspective produces this symphony of beautiful design. So that's very wonderful. And this is Venus over 8 years. So it looks like that, and it can also be depicted as the star. There's 8 years apart, very tiny, very geometrical. All the planets do this, but I'm showing you Venus in particular. Each one does it differently. They have a different spirographic design. Okay, so now in nature, these are called fractals. Fractals are little small images or representations of the holographic universe. Each part contains the whole within it. Very difficult to understand that with our linear mind. It takes a time to really meditate upon, wow, woven within each little part is the design of the whole. Wow. And what I mentioned before a few times, the etheric web, referred to in science, I believe that they call the string theory, weaves the magical, mysterious matrix that gives the manifest universe function, form, and structure. This magical, mysterious matrix is exactly a good set of words to describe what astrology is, quite frankly. See, I know you all might have a taste of knowing that when I see an astrology chart, for example, Lisa, I don't know you, I look at your chart, I'm like, boom, 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 boom. You're like, well, how does that really work? I mean, why does that work? You're thinking, well, what is that, right? And I'm trying to say, this is how it works. This is the science of it. It's the holistic universe is founded in fundamental intelligence, but there's a logic to it. And it gets really interesting. You start to think, wow, the whole cosmos is unified from the cosmic and to the molecular, to the atomic, to the, like, wow. And so while we in our life live our certain flow, rhythm, destiny, it has its ups and downs, its dramas. We're in a body, we have to eat, we get tired, we go through the motions and this and that. Oh my God, right? But and it's not always easy, and there's karma. So I say that again and again. But in the end, it's all God. It's all good, if you like. Now that's a little bit. It's not great when people go through suffering. I appreciate. But when we come to appreciate that, even no matter who it is going through whatever it is, even all the dramas on the planet is in a solar system. And the solar system is in a galaxy, and it starts to, you think, wow, what's that mean? It doesn't mean don't be caring of people, no. But it does mean there is a divine order to it. It's just one way of saying it. So we get into that now. We get into this notion that we are on the planet in a perceiving role. Now remember how this is like the point in the center with the circumference, the eye. So we are perceivers, and what we see abounding in nature are the signs mirrored in intricate design. So like in nature we see the signs of beauty, and we see intelligence, and we see geometry, and everywhere are the signs of the designs revealing creative intention, purpose, a plan. That's what the religions are trying to say, so they're right. But what they're doing is they're leading people down the path of moronic, empty, kind of almost like boring rituals. How many times we're going to go back to church and take the host? It's like, I think I want you to take the host, and you know what I want you to do with it. It's like, show me something. Let's do something real. Let's stop this endless, boring, crappy ritual. You understand? This drink the blood of God or Christ and then take the host. It's like, you're kidding, right? I have to say that myself. I'm like, I did this in kindergarten. Are we still doing this? Is there anything else? And what people need is inspiration. What they need to be, in my opinion, is be awakened to realize, oh my God, we live in a conscious, intelligent, purposeful, loving universe, and we are it experiencing itself. That's a statement. And astrology, by the way, it works, proves it. But going on with this. And what is more is that nature communicates. This is where we get into the astrology. It has signatures. Like we own every single thumbprint is different. It's not freaky. And guess what? Understand? That is that. It's that simple. It's barely evident. And if you're overly educated moron, you cannot see it. And there's a lot of educated morons. There are hordes of brainwashed, educated morons. I'm sorry to say it that way, but put it this way. Let me rephrase. They themselves are souls incarnate, but in their consciousness, they are moronic. They have been brainwashed. They do not see a very evident connection between the galactic and what's up here. Oh no, everybody's a soul incarnate who has a purpose. Society. But okay, let me rephrase.
I'm just wondering if something is purpose.
Oh, you mean there's a rhyme and reason to our relative denial? Yes, I think, yes, I do. As I said at the beginning, there's bound to be a reason for this particular phase. The particular phase of history that we're going through right now, materialism, basically, in my opinion, at its core, is to teach us what not to do. Now, I know that sounds a bit strong. So, that sounds judgmental. We like our toys. We like to do things. And I'm saying, I don't have a problem with enjoying life. Go skiing, have wine, make love, enjoy life, right? However, the river is poisoned, and the ocean is poisoned, and the air is poisoned. At what point does the poisoning poison us? We're being poisoned. So we have to think, what does that mean? That means that if we could have our technology, you know what? You know that saying, you want your cake and eat it too. Like, duh, don't you? I want my cake and eat it too, don't you? Like, it means, what am I supposed to do? Have the cake and not eat it? That seems rather cruel, right? No, what I'm trying to say is, I don't know what that is really meant to say. What I'm trying to say is, there's nothing wrong with enjoying life. But because we're in a materialistic mire, what happens is, we then begin to justify actions that have insanity in them because we're addicted. It's all addiction. The whole thing. It's all addiction. We're addicted to thinking, and then, but here's where it gets nasty. We're being played. We're being played. Because
I just had an insight on that. So the negative of it is
Humans and moronic is the right way of describing it, by the way, which means another way of saying it is they're asleep. But ironically, they can be very educated. That's really the irony. But see, the people are good. I'm not meaning to judge or condemn anybody. Please understand. It's just a bit of a rant, really. All peoples are souls. And in the game of life, there's different soul levels, and it's never meant to be strictly utopia. This is school, and we're meant to interact and engage. It's going to create conflict. Now, I'm not trying to say it should be some grand utopia where we're all genuinely hugging each other, although we like that. There is something to be said about the conflict of life, by the way. Conflict of life produces a reason to evolve. In other words, if there was no villains, there'd be no heroes. So when we think of it that way, we can begin to go, okay, it's a game, there's rhyme and reason, but so it really is ultimately, I have to admit, when I say the way I see it, it's just a bit of frustration, a bit of a type of indulgence, it's a type of a rant, and it's not ultimately that helpful. So that comes out of me only because really what that is a bit of attached to what I think it should be right now. But on a more enlightened level, I know that it's all a part of a phase. And you know what? We can pollute this planet until the cows come home. We could create what the sci-fi movies show. Complete devastation. Cloud cover. Poisonous, noxious. Every single fish is dead. We're dying. We have not long to live, right? The end. And nature will do itself. They'll just go. It'll just either burn or freeze or do whatever it needs, and it goes, out of my burning, freezing, or whatever I will do, guess what? I will be reborn. And guess what? Within my atmosphere, within me, is you. We come from it. We come from it. This notion we come from the apes, I'm going to tell you with absolute firm conviction, that's not true. We do have animal bodies. But we're humans and apes aren't. Why aren't apes evolving into humans still? It's a simple question. Why aren't the apes still evolving? They're like us. I'm not saying apes aren't great, because I think it'd be great to have an ape. That may sound even arrogant, but if you follow what I mean is, I love animals. And animals are psychic, beautiful beings. We just happen to be humans. We have an extra chromosome set, and we have conscious free will, and it's a different game plan. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that there's lots to be said about this. So just that little bit of digression, just to sort of make a point that's frustrating for us. I'm frustrated, but on the other hand, at a higher level, there's a plan. It's all generally good, but that doesn't make me if we like it all, or we agree with it all, or it's easy. No. Difficult. But if we can get back to that there's a deeper rhyme and reason, that's good. But where we are at, just to say quickly, we're at a crisis point where we can't continue to perpetuate this amount of darkness. But you might notice that no sooner that we hit, I have this vision for where we're at, humanity's at with the human condition. We're like a ball that's been thrown at the ground. If you were to do a slow-mo on a ball and hit the ground, it would compress like this. But then when it springs out, it goes, and then it'll be just above the ground. That's where we're at right now. Can you understand that, Rich? We're coming out of the compression. You're saying at least about the age of the Iron Age. Okay. The Iron Age is and then the Bronze Age is the ball is just coming off the floor, but it's going to flip really high. And it's a cycle process. Do you understand that, Rich? We're coming out of a compression, which is dark, intense, harsh, and it's still kind of harsh, but there's a civilization, and what's happening is we're awakening. The new technology, the new understanding, and the global culture, and everybody's bringing in the pearls of wisdom that they all respectively found. Oh my God, we're waking up. This is the image of the sound. All of these images, right, that you see down the middle, are created by sound. Sound. Like you think, whoa, that's kind of cool. That was just sound, you say? Yes, that's right. And out of that, there's astrological. The astrology chart shares in its core fundamental holistic principle. So sound does very special things when it's sounded in what's called etheric waters. And over time, people created maps which further revealed how precisely nature communicates. And in its communication, it guides and informs and reveals deep purpose and timing and psychological themes and destinies. That's what astrology does. It's very wonderful. But one could also see the maps in the hands and the feet. So we can, gain insight and gain information from maps of other sorts other than the astrology. So I'm not suggesting it's the only one by any means. And then we can even see the eye. This would be a psychological eye map. And this would be a physiological eye map. And this would be the map of all the organs in your body are mapped in your ear. So each part contains within it the whole. That's what it's trying to say. That's what holism is all about. And it's interesting that there's the main meridians. And there's 12, by the way, 12 main meridians, just like the 12 signs of the zodiac. And it shows this journey. Then we get the chakras, where each are connected to sounds. And we get into chakras, we get into the sacred geometry, the Taurus tube, archetypes. This would be shape-based archetypes. So we begin to see, wow, this is a science that can be called mystical spiritual. So not only are we directly connecting to the cosmos, as this is our brain, and we're connecting our glandular system to the whole grand unity of things. And then we also experience electrochemical connection, and then our brain synapses mirror this process, and this is what I showed before with the whole universe like that. So we, in our co-creative participation and perception, it's a significant component of our experience of reality. So science, like the multiplication of the ages, is proving that we are co-creative. Even science is saying, so that's where we're at a good point right now. And the rest is, there's a lot of politics. We get into politics, greed, ambition, corruption, and divide and conquer principles, which are strong in the world right now and have been, but it's really critical now because we have technology. So we're really moving fast. So in our world, the world's changing quickly now. We have to. So if we get into this notion of our pure objectivity, therefore, is ultimately an illusion. We don't see the world the way it is. We see it the way we are. And we come to realize that ultimate reality is subjective, not objective. Oneness, unity, one great thing, Goddess, if you like, experiencing herself, himself, as both source and gift. We are it experiencing itself. So as source and manifest reality. So then we have a brain, which is our organ of perception in the body. And it talks about right and left brain, and how one's more linear, one's more emotional and feeling and experiential, and there's more analytical. Then we get into the notion of the brain as having conscious, subconscious, and so forth. And we get into this notion that we have just a whole intricate way of our whole consciousness working through our brain, but recognizing our brain is the CPU, but it doesn't live in the organ, just like while the computer itself is a brain of a mechanical sort, it can exist in the cloud is another, and also the electricity, the source of the power for the brain, is not limited to its life. The brain can die, but the electricity lives. These are ways of paralleling. So we look at our solar system in two ways. There's two hemispheres of the brain. We can see the solar system as the Earth is at the center, or we can see the sun as the center. And from a wide-angle view of the universe, we can see that the universe is populated by these galactic cells. Each is a galaxy, and they're like cells in the body of the universe. And this is just, if you take the Hubble telescope and you look, it goes, oh my God, these are all galaxies. Galaxies got billions and billions of stars, and by the way, the closest star to us is 4.22 light years away. That's so far away, oh my God, it takes light. If we could travel the speed of light for 4.22 years to get to the closest star, that means, oh my God, it's big. Wow, and we're not even close to out of the galaxy. The galaxy is hundreds, thousands, in fact, of light years across. It's a crazy thing when we start thinking of size and how big the whole universe is, and just nothing short of awesome. So you can see that here. The galaxies are really pretty things, aren't they? Or these spiraling principles. Look at that one. Looks like an eye. Something. And you say, wow, that is so cool the way creation works. That's what they mean by as above, so below. And this would be, we get even, so we're getting very wide angle. All the big wide angle. We get closer to galaxies, then we're getting closer. We see the Milky Way, Andromeda, which is our neighboring. And then there's one very closer. Now we're in our own galaxy. We're coming close to our own galaxy. And we're getting closer and closer, called the Milky Way. Then when we get really deep in it, we come to our solar system. That would be our sun, the nucleus. And then we see it like this cosmic galactic cell, as I mentioned. The solar system is like a cell in the galaxy. The galaxy is a cell within the universe. Then it has all these ways of measuring it. We can see it. These are just depictions. So if we were from way out in space, we'd see our entire solar system looking like this. That would be the center of the sun, and all the planets would be around it. So we get this cell principle, as I've mentioned a few times. And this is where I go back to how close, the closest star is 4.22 light years away. So that means, by the way, the furthest planet, Pluto, from Earth is 8 light hours away. So that means, put another way, the closest star to our own sun is 6,860 times further away than the furthest planet. Understand? So the planets are really close, even though. So it takes you have to have a bit of background in the cosmic scheme of things to really appreciate that. But you can get an idea. So from this holistic standpoint, you can see that we're not only influenced by the planets, they're actually extensions of us. This is an interesting idea. They're sometimes described as cosmic organs. The planets in the solar system play a very intrinsic part, not in our physical, but also in our psyche, in the cell-like notion of the solar system is like a cell. The planets in the cell are organs, they're aspects of it. As I showed right here, if you were to dissect the cell, you see that each part plays a very special role. So while they have all these words like cytosol, or vesicle, or centriole, or mitochondrion, or microtubules, and Golgi complex, and lysosome, etc. These would be ways of describing. They would be names of planets. So the planets, the cells work as a unit, the same as the planets in the solar system. And so we get into this very interesting, right? And everything, by the way, is just right. Everything, the way the planet is in proximity to the sun, with the moon, and everything, it's just what they call the Goldilocks principle. Everything's just right. This notion of a random universe is possible, but it implies there's no purpose in life. And it's just like, oh, well, it's just random. That's a sale, and it's all marketing. It's really amazing how much it has taken on a life of its own, you might say. So when we get into it, we come full circle to that, the sun, moon, and earth relationship, what I meant earlier about how the waxing waning moon and the seasons and so forth. So look how the design the earth makes. The earth is going around the sun, and the moon is going around the earth, and it produces this. Because what happens is the moon going around the earth goes around. See that? Does that mean? So the orbit of the earth is this around the sun, and the moon creates that. So you see, it kind of becomes very poetic, is the basic way of describing it. So, and by the way, since matter is actually 99.99% space, that's very paradoxical, very hard to understand. But we also understand that it kind of leads us, and this is where science is doing its work in its own positive way. It's leading us to reconsider who and what we deem reality and materiality. But P.S., the sun itself is 99% the mass of the entire solar system. So you have to play with that a bit. So matter is 99.99% space. There's more space in the molecules. It's like they're little mini solar systems that are producing anything in the material world. But the sun itself is 99% of the entire mass of the entire solar system. It takes time to think about this for a while. In physics, there's this principle called string theory. Now, scientists are so baffled by it, the only way they can describe it is to call a magical, mysterious matrix. Oh, interesting scientific words, because that brings us back to metaphysics and science. And we come back to our multidimensionality as, souls plugged in through the etheric to creation as a way of describing it, as a way of defining it. And so what emerges out of this is what's called synchronicity, which is another way of saying that the outer expression of archetypes, which indicates inner dimensions, which reveal a massive universe or omniverse, multidimensionality, pervaded with consciousness. So there's an intrinsic weave of realities that produce paradoxes. Yet, we can clearly see that there's a conscious, intelligent, creative, purpose, loving source at play. And this is how astrology works, by the way. And these signs create parallels in nature that reveal to us an intelligent, sensitive, artistic universe which we share in, and with which we have an intimate, intricate connection at every level. So we're so one with it that our ego gets upset, we get frustrated, we get tired, so we go into moments, and it's normal. But we're at more spiritual, meditative, unitive, communion-based moments where we feel, oh, it's all one, it's all good. So we come to our notion of destiny. We are here to be co-creators. Cooperation is the key word. And this is how, we can say the intelligent design woven into existence works this way. And it's self-evident, there's a plan, a purpose, a destiny. We are it, and it is us. That's how it works. Just like that. So that's cool. And that's the fun thing I like to share and enjoy doing, and that's how astrology works. So you see what the whole story comes round circle to saying it's very organic. Just you look at the orange, there's the mandala, you look at the food, there's spirals, you think about how we are. So of course in everyday life we can always think this way. We go through the drama, we go through the motions, we have to eat, sleep, and do all the things we do. It's all perfect and good. But there's this beautiful divine plan. And when I have this opportunity in my own way to look at astrology, oh my God, I can read the code. But that doesn't make me any better or any different. That's just because I'm in that certain archetype. And every one of you are in your own. So it's nice, huh? It becomes all things equal, perfect, wonderful, and it's just a celebration of existence, heaven, mind, and reason. Questions? No comments, questions. It's pretty wonderful, poetic, and nice order to things. I didn't make up anything, really. I connect the dots in a particularly my own way, but really, I'm certainly how I connected these dots, and I did do it in a creative fashion, but I certainly didn't make up that dot connecting process. I just more or less decoded it, and there it is, like, oh. And I've always been interested, how does this work in astrology? So that's what it amounts to, that kind of story. And you can get deeper into the science, whether it's chemistry or biology or whatever. But what happens is, valid as that really is, what happens at worst is people lose sight of the forest with the trees. Yeah. Too much academic, too much intellectual. They're lost in a maze of, oh my God, it's so hard to study for my biology exam, and all this kind of stuff. So it's not wrong that they're doing that. It's valid validity, but it's what, students should be offered more one-on-one courses like this. Just like get the big picture, then go into the little picture, and then see if it still is congruent for you. It is a way of describing, so that's just a kind of consideration of how it could be. But as it is right now, the human condition is kind of polarized between these two forces. And we're going to, it's not the end of the world. It's not strictly wrong, but it's where we're at, and that's the unique condition. So there we go. And I'm going to trust that